Okay, it's hip replacement episode number 32. Kyle, I was listening to Zadie Smith, the author, just a minute ago,
Mhm.
talking about being 50 and her new, in the context of her new collection of essays. And she was talking about whether or not uh, you could, as a 50-year-old, commune with your 25-year-old self. And given that it is series producer Campbell's birthday today,
Happy birthday,
and that
Campbell.
he is 19 today,
The other
except if you're
25.
carding him at the bar, in which case he's 22 today. The idea of communing with your younger self is hot on my mind. So for
Okay.
this episode number 32 with Kaley and Megan, I'd love to dig into that a little bit. But first, would you explain who Kaley and Megan are, please?
Absolutely. So we're joined by Megan Collins and Kaley Mullin, who are culture analysts and the duo behind Cool Shiny Insights. I've been aware of their work, y'all's work, for myriad reasons, sort of like in the halls of Substack, but then also we have a Google connection because I did a lot of work for Google in the early part of this decade, and we had some overlap there in some ways, and finally we're meeting and making this happen because we've been trying to make it work for a little bit. So welcome, Megan and Kayla.
Thank
Thank
you
you for
so much.
having
Yeah,
us.
I'm a long time reader of Kyle's trend report, so I'm very
Me
excited to
too.
make this previously parasocial relationship where
Hey,
I've just been reading his work more social. So it's really nice to be here. Thank you for having us.
Megan, Kaley, where do we find you? Where are you dialing in from? I forgot to ask beforehand.
I'm in Chicago.
And I'm in Los Angeles, California.
amazing.
The old LACA. I'm going to be there tomorrow.
Ah,
I'm going out to the big Adobe Max conference so
oh
I can
wow.
find out what's going on with creativity. Um, well,
Finally,
so sorry, go ahead.
finally, figure out what's going on with creativity.
Yeah,
I mean,
somebody will know.
this is going to be a very illuminatory trip. I can just tell.
Yeah.
Well, so notwithstanding, my intro, I think one of the things that we try to talk about all the time on hip replacement is the idea that uh, where you are at in life stages, and not so much how old you are exactly, but sort of where the points at which you've reached in your life affect how you see things. But I was curious about Zadie Smith's assertion that a 50-year-old can't commune with their 25-year-old self. I don't know. What do you think? True or false?
I think it's funny that you brought this up because as part of the preparation for this podcast, I was actually like listening to one of the last podcasts I recorded a while ago, and I talked
Mm.
about the movie My Old Ass with Aubrey
Oh yeah,
Ah,
Plaza.
sure.
And that
right.
is essentially the plot of that movie. And what I really liked about, so for those who don't know, the plot is essentially it centers on a young girl who's just turning 18. So if you're looking for ideas, producer Campbell, she and her friends go out into the woods and they do some mushrooms. And her friends get super
Hot
high.
topic
She
in our
does not.
family, as it were. But anyway, sorry. Go ahead, Megan.
And
Well,
her experience is that she sees like this older woman who's Aubrey Plaza, and it is her older self. And then they start texting back and forth. And
oh,
there's a whole plot twist at the end that I'm not going to spoil for you guys, but the whole film is about exploring this idea of communing with your older self and your younger self, and what is that exchange. And essentially, I would say that the point the movie is trying to make is that you have it pretty much figured out when you're young. It's just like it gets all convoluted, and it's about like going back to who you were and remembering who you are. So, highly recommend that film as you're continuing to think about that.
I love that idea. That gives me hope. But could I?
So yeah, true or false, Kyle? You can or can't
I mean,
commune with your,
I
or you will or won't be able to when you're 50, like I am,
I
commune with your
think
25-year-old
I
self.
do think about this not all the time, but I think about it with some regularity in relationship to changes of the differences between myself now versus them, which I think is really what this question gets at. I think that I would be able to have a good conversation with my younger self, but I do think that the younger self was insane in a lot of ways. Like that, the 25-year-old me was like a crazy and like party, like high energy. I like to think I have a lot of those qualities still, and I know I do, but like it was like at 150. So like I feel like I would exhaust myself. So, but like I do think like to the Megan, to your point about that movie, is I think a lot of those things that we see today are were there, and I think it's more of a matter of like keeping up with that energy because I think that was like a lot. So that's my bigger concern is like, could I maintain the pace and even understand it? Who knows? What do y'all think?
I also have a movie touch point. I think of the movie Bridesmaids, where Rose Byrne and Kristen Wiig are having that conversation about whether people stay the same or change. And Kristen's like, no, I think that we're, we are always evolving. Or no, Kristen's on the like, you are who you are, and Rose is on the you're always evolving side. And I've had this conversation with my friends where I'm like, yes, I've changed since I was in my teens or 20s. But I look back at things that I did and I'm like, that is so me, like the
Right.
through line of my personality has been strong. And, Megan and I are working on this like digital calendar of cultural moments. And it's bringing me back to my freshman year dorm where I literally printed out the schedule of content of TV that I wanted everybody to watch with me, and we taped it to the back of our remotes. And I'm like, it's
Yeah.
it's just history repeating itself, where it's like I just want people to be into the same things that I'm in, and whether the technology changes or whatever, like I don't know, I'm still the same person.
Part of this whole thing for me that's so interesting is that I have found myself of late. I mean, not partially because of series producer Campbell and his, uh, approaching his 20s, but also because, so for instance, I got given a pair of Nike Air Max 95s that I like the folks at Nike seeded me, and they're the same shoes that I wore when I was 25. And I bought a pair of chinos that kind of look roughly like
Wow.
the pants I wore when I was 25. It's the silhouettes have come back around, and so I was walking around wearing these pants and wearing these shoes and thinking to myself, man, I think my 25-year-old self would think I was pretty cool. And then I was like, wait a minute, if I was 25 and saw a 50-year-old dude wearing these shoes, I don't know how I would feel about it. And then I went back to the moment of like in the year 2000 when that was happening. I don't think there was the level of intergenerational communion,
Hmm.
to use a non-religious term, to use a non-religious sense, that we have now. I don't think there was as much, the availability and the flow of information was much more segmented
Hmm.
and much more different. And life stage was not treated as a qualifier. It was treated as a separator. And so it's been interesting to think about that and go, yeah, it's good that I can commune directly with my almost 20-year-old son on a pure level, because my father would not have been able to do that for me. But then you can't help but think, wait a minute, am I so chopped and unk that I am imagining this? You know what I
I
mean? And
mean,
so it's kind of a wild thing.
but I feel like that's a really interesting thing because I feel like yes, sure, like the walls between generations have come down a little bit, and I think a lot of that is it's less because those walls don't exist. I think they still exist because that always exists culturally, like even outside of
Sure.
generational culture. But I think the means by which to look into the culture and like take that wall down is much easier because of social media, because of myriad other things, which I think then is how you have that relationship between, say, you and Campbell being perhaps so rich and much more like understanding is because of that. Because I think that that's something that, like, if I think about my boomer dad and me who is millennial, like that doesn't exist because like the missing piece is that like he can't and doesn't look into my world in the way that like you can, and like that sure does. Or I'm sure there are parents who are of that age and whatever, like I think funny enough, like my mom is the opposite of that, where she does look into that world and it makes her understand it better and have more of an interest, versus the other side, which like not at all. So but like that
Okay.
is like a fascinating something. Yeah, is that something that
Yeah,
like
that point about your mom was going to be kind of my challenge to this of like this generation of dads spends the most time with their kids of any generation of dads like ever. So it's
wow.
Is
like how much
that's a statistic, Megan?
yeah. Yeah. So yeah, it's like the amount of time that like these generations of dads want to be invested in their kids' lives is just like, we've never seen this before. So even that, and you're like, but moms were into that. So a
Right.
lot of this is like, how much of this is like a gender difference versus like a generational
Totally.
difference. And I think that those sites of communing between the generations have always existed, but it was like school, church, like, and often spaces that were very female dominated. And now we're seeing that be more like the commercial sector. And so that's why we see there being a lot more interest in like what the youths are doing, and men asking the question, am I chopped or unk, you know? Women have
Well,
been
okay.
women have been consumed with aging forever, you know, like,
Right,
and that question
right.
of like, am I still relevant? Yeah.
Fair. Okay. Well, speaking of that, let's call it transparency between generations, parents being available and up to what, are aware of what kids are up to, and kids being more transparent about what they're up to and so on. There's one area in which I would like this to not be the case. That's been a hot topic over the last week. And that is, of course, this massive 10,000 word article in Harper's about gooning. I'm sort of speechless to a degree, but like, any comments on this at all, guys? Any about as a marker of where we're at in society?
I have a lot of thoughts on this, but I feel like to me the biggest takeaway is that it's to me it's less a generational thing and more of it reveals what internets you consume. In a lot of ways, and like how you interact with them. And I think, I don't think this is outing myself to anybody, is like, being a queer person online, you're much more, there is a lower wall and a lower barrier to be put into, for lack of better words, like sexual spaces, be it people who are trying to solicit a sexual encounter or basically the conversation therein. And so like a lot of the things in that article, I don't think are necessarily unique to a generation. I think that there are like, it brought to mind, I'm forgetting the name of the writer, really, really great young, or not young, I think he's literally my age. Young then, I guess, gay writer in New York, who wrote a piece in New York Magazine over the summer about how, like, more gay men are having sex than ever because the technology and the drugs and everything available makes sex instantaneous. And that to me is sort of like a flip side or an extension of this piece. It felt like a bit of a sequel because they're saying the same things. And like literally, I should have pulled the book out. A lot of this was written about in Tony Tillamute's book, Rejection. And so like a lot of these things are not, to me, not necessarily new. There were spaces that were more exaggerated and a bit more like, say, frightening and gross, as we all know. But I think that to me, the big tell in the story was like, do you know about these parts of the internet, or are you unaware of it? And I think that is part of the big reaction to it, was that it was like, I had no idea this existed. And like, that's fair. But it was a similar thing to like, post Charlie Kirk. Oh, wow, I had no idea what a groiper is or what transmaxing is. Like,
Sure.
Yes, those are really unique things. But like, if you stare at the Black Mirror long enough, like you will see the gooners too.
Yeah. I think the hook of that article too is in the extremeness of the behavior. It's really about like the kink and the fetish. I am, as a straight-ish woman, on like, probably similar internets in some regards to you, Kyle, but a lot of other kind of non or different spaces than you. I was very blind and like uninvited to the gooning space. And also probably just like a little bit not interested, like
Totally.
if I saw that, I'd just scroll past. But I think I see that a corollary, kind of on the more female side of the acceptance and rise of romantic literature
Right.
and smut and dark romance and just a lot of kind of taboo stuff where there is just this acceptance and cultural conversation around sexuality that is a little bit new and interesting.
And I also think
Absolutely.
Oh yeah, go for it, Megan.
something I find interesting in all of this too is like, in a world where so much of how you self-identify is tied to your consumption, I think that's where a lot of this also, and like the kind of interest in this comes, because it's like, well, if I really identify as a Swiftie because I consume so much Taylor Swift content, what does it say about these people that this is the type of content that they're consuming, or even like that you know about it? And I almost feel like proud that I've ignored that part of the internet, to where like I know about it and I have enough context to know how to step around it and avoid it, you know?
Yes.
Yeah.
I guess the whole thing to me is a little. It just demonstrates the fact that we are in the continuing along a K-shape. That K-shaped. It's almost like the K-shaped economy path, but it's like the trending towards extremes, and those extremes you could imagine as niche, and those niches being valuable, and then you could imagine those niches as being like extremes and being dangerous. But I guess the thing that I wondered reading this thing, it's like if you're so invested in this lifestyle or identity or whatever, what changes? What diverts you from that sort of path or changes that momentum? Speaking of movies from a couple of minutes ago, my wife and I watched two movies, one of which was the Rose Byrne film If I Had Legs I'd Kick You, which is about this mother who feels, I think, trapped by motherhood, right? Not to give too much of the movie away, but feels trapped by motherhood and feels like she is on this, path that she can't control. And then similarly, we watched Begonia, went and saw it on opening night, which is a head trip. And both recommended films, both like neither of them best pictures, I don't think, but both of them like worth seeing and worth commenting on. But in that, the character that Jesse, what's his name,
Plemons
plays, Jesse Plemons plays, talks about having gone through the spectrum of beliefs from literally like far left to far right and back again to get to the place where he's at and kidnapping the CEO. And it made me wonder, I was like, when you head down a path like that, what are the points that divert you? Where are the big or little developments that can send people off in different directions? Because clearly, like, if we've got this Gooner culture where people are showing up to drive-throughs and then killing themselves, that's not a path that we want to encourage in any way, shape, or form.
Go ahead,
Kyle,
Kaley.
can I
Go ahead.
add too? I think another interesting topical thing to this is the main senatorial candidate, Graham Blatner. He, in the news this week, has been talking about how when he left, I believe, the Marines, I'm not totally sure, he was in an extremely dark place and was, doing a lot of shit posting and a lot of incel related kind of stuff online. And then he, met his wife and got off that path. And, it's a lot of conversations about like forgiveness and growth and things like that. And I think it is extremely unfortunate that oftentimes it does feel like it's meeting a woman or being, I don't know, like being in spaces with women that does kind of divert this behavior. I hate that it has to be the work of women to help them find an off-ramp to this. I wish it wasn't the case, but it does feel like a lot of these people do credit getting in relationships that are more healthy, or just, I don't know, like outside of their literal parents' basement, that does kind of help them get away from it.
I would say part of that conversation is like, well, if you think about the incel guy and like the Gooner bro, like a fundamental part of that relationship, or let's call it contract, is a lack of a partner or a real life companion in a way. And like it leads to this dehumanization of a potential partner, be it same sex, different, or opposite sex person. And like that's sort of where you end up in those sort of like caves, is because like you've really dehumanized, and like exactly to your point. And that's the unfortunate reality, is like that's how you sort of like can get pulled out of it. But I think this is, again, like this is becoming a larger and larger conversation, specifically at this point. Is like I remember, like, let's say it was like 2022, maybe between like 2022 and 2024, there were a lot of the like post QAnon conversations, and I feel like those are continuing to happen, and like obviously probably getting into more of like post like Tea Party, et cetera, sort of beliefs. Like I think like we're getting into the space of like the hangover from a lot of 2010 ideologies. Another really good example is like, and this is it's going to sound sensational, but I don't think it is like a lot of conversations about like detransitioning and things like that. And I think a lot of people when they talk about that, it was like, look, that was a moment of my life and like I accept that and I love that part of me, but like that isn't actually like I had learned a lot and like I still acknowledge that that was a part of my life and part of who I am and I always will be that, but like I'm settling myself, we're all settling ourselves. I think that is the space of now a part of this conversation is that like we're hearing from people who are exiting or like taking those off ramps out, like the Grand Platinum. It's a really good example to understanding, I think, less maybe the psychology of it, but more just to sort of like understand like how I don't want to call it like digital peer pressure, but like it's very much like you can be in a space online that can feel like it's your whole life. And we know that. That's a part of fandom. Swifties are a great example. But like when it sort of enters into aspects of like your corporal reality, be it a tattoo or be it like having hours of like self intercourse or whatever, like that's then when like the contract becomes so extreme that's harder to break it, and which I think is what all this gets at, obviously.
All right, so did we fix it yet? Did we fix Gooning?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay.
I'm not going to solve that. I don't want to solve that.
Hip replacement listeners, stay tuned. We will.
We're not taking up.
We're not giving up.
That's not my cross.
Like Megan said, we see it on the internet and we scroll past it.
Exactly.
This is not our.
Oh,
not my burden. Not my ministry.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, all right. So in that case, then let's move on to another little bit of emergency work that might need to be done, and that is Gen Z killing the workplace emergency. I have to confess, guys, I don't really even know what any of these words mean. Maybe
what?
I'm just. Please explain.
I will really quickly give the background on this. I actually don't remember where do you remember where the story was from at least? I don't recall because I read it last week.
I'm trying to open the archive link right now.
But either way, the story is about a rise in quote unquote Gen Z culture who are basically disarming that sort of bomb, let's call it, or that feeling in jobs that like everything is so important, everything's out of 10, everything is Q0, go, like this is so important, I need this today. And like they basically are meeting that with like, I don't think this is that important, like this can wait, like I actually have to do XYZ things, then I will get to that. And like meaning I'm putting my life before this work emergency because a work emergency can wait. I'm separating, my work life from my personal life. You don't need a response to my email right now. And that I think, to me, what was interesting about it is like, yes, I think that exists. I've worked with those Gen Z people for sure. And I think that that's gotten into a bigger sort of thought process. But I also know having, I think we all, except for you, Ben, worked with a friend of mine, Kate, at Google. And she really was she espoused that all the time, that idea. And like, I remember working with many people who sort of had that feeling. And they were more, say, millennials who were like, this can wait. Like this, yes, I might need this actually tonight, but the rest you can wait on. And like as a manager, I was definitely like that to my team. I was like, no. Like we don't need, like, do this bullshit later. Like we don't have to do this now. We can wait. That's a lot of that is time management. But like I think the breakout to that is like that Gen Z is the ones who are being like, no, enough workaholicism, enough things being urgent. Not everything is urgent, especially when you work in like PR or social media or even Hollywood. You're not a doctor. And that's sort of like the classic case. Like we're not doing heart surgery. Like that comes up all the time, which again is not a Gen Z thing. Like that is probably just an everybody colloquialism.
Sure. Well, look, I guess the thing to me is I had a former colleague who is half a generation older than me, and he's probably would have. He used to say like a lack of preparation on your part doesn't constitute an emergency on my part, because his pat way of saying that, and I guess it just seemed odd to me that this was characterized as being a thing that is justifies a generational difference in response. But hearing the millennials on the call, it sounds like maybe It does.
Well, really quickly, because I want to hear like Megan, Kaley, what you think,
Yeah,
but like I think a lot of this is also industry specific, which I don't think the story does a good job of sort of like
that's
explaining.
probably true.
Because like I think that like what the story is talking about and talking to is a specific coastal or at least city feeling within specific industries. I don't think it's every industry. I definitely don't think it's happening outside of cities. But yes, do we think it's Gen Z? What do we think?
I agree, Kyle. I think it's like knowledge work that is borderless in terms of being on your phone and being on your computer. And I do think there is a different flavor to this for Gen Z. I think it is like a tale as old as generational, discourse to for older generations to think younger generations are lazy or doing things wrong, of course. So that is not new at all. But I think the flavor of Gen Z that we're talking about now is more about the porous, like pushing back on the porousness of that like knowledge work that is
Mm.
so orderless. And Megan and I have talked about this a lot because I am a few like half a generation older than her. We're both millennials, but I was actually her manager at YouTube.
Oh.
And yeah, we that's how we started working together. And
So now the power dynamic is revealed. Well, we
yes,
understand.
yes.
I'm
Also, for
joking,
Um,
Kaylee. Go.
context, while I am technically a millennial, I was raised by Gen Xers in the 90s in LA. So
Oh
I'm
wow.
very like Gen Z coded.
Yeah.
yeah, very
Yeah,
Gen Z
yeah.
coded, and I'm boomer parents. So we yeah, so I led youth trends and in cultural research at YouTube. So we were in this space of youth, talking about youth a lot. But when Megan came on board, I did have to kind of adjust because Google is a very 24/7, like you can reach me at any time, you can ping me at any time, I will get back to you within 2 hours, not 24 hours. And Megan is very much like I need to work, I need flow, I need space, I need boundaries, and had a much more honestly healthy relationship to urgency around the work than I do. And so, when I couldn't reach her by ping, when I like couldn't reach her after 5, I was, I would admit to being a little bit annoyed and like feeling like there's friction. But I also, again, am leading youth trends. I do position myself in general towards young people as like I want to understand before I want to judge. And I think that's
Right.
like genuinely important to my success in this field is I just like feel like I want to give young people the benefit of the doubt before jumping to judgment. And I realized like that is much healthier. Like even though I was annoyed at it, I was inspired by it. And I feel like working
So
with
she didn't
Megan,
fire me.
sorry, what?
Good.
I
Congratulations.
said
And so she
quit.
didn't fire me, and we continued to work together for a few more years. And she didn't tell me this until like pretty recently. And I'm like, I'm glad you
Wow.
didn't tell me because I would have done what you wanted. I would have like been stressed out and like I would have like made sure I met all of those goals and the work wouldn't have been as good. And like we're both really proud of the work we were able to do at YouTube. And like I think part of what we did was like kind of the way we delivered our insights was very Gen Z coded. But if I had been trying to conform to this like ideal Google employee, we wouldn't have been able to do that. So I think that's also an important
Hmm.
thing as you're like generational tension should be mined for solutions, you know?
Kaylee, did
Absolutely.
you ever pick up the phone and call?
She
I
does
mean,
now.
no, I'm a
She does
millennial.
now.
Well, that's exactly why I'm asking, Kaylee. That's
I would
exactly why I'm
never
asking.
do. I mean, I will like be like, I'll text ahead, and even then, I'm like, I call you not very much. Like
That's
we
my
would
preferred
text.
thing. And that's where I've drawn the line too. Cause like that's another thing. Like I'm like I have a lot of internet friends. Like everything is on my phone. So it's like there's a lot of people who have sent me messages who I'm not responding to because
Right.
that would be what I'm doing all day, you know?
Right.
But I will always answer a call. So like
Oh.
that's my thing where it's like I'm completely unreachable, but like call me. But like no one
That's
calls
well,
me.
that is yeah. It's funny. I mean, this is the reason I ask is
Shocked.
whenever I worked, especially late as Vice became gigantic and late in my time there, I was just like, guys, I'm old, which means I don't know how to use Slack well. text messages are another data point. Emails are another data point. If you need me, call me. Just call me. I'll pick up the phone. I'm like, it's not like that anymore with spam calls, but it was literally a period of time where it's like, I felt like it was my job to pick up the phone whenever it rang. So I was just call me. And nobody called me. And it was, I found it bizarre, but nobody did.
That is wild to me. If anybody calls me, I'm like, someone died. Is everything okay?
Yeah.
Like what happened? Like calling to me, like if you need me, text me or email me. That's how you get to me. If you call me, I'm like, my mind is like, I'm going to jail. Like, I don't know this number. It's the police. They finally found me. Yeah. So I'm like, I finally caught up for something. But like, I think that to me, I think one thing in hearing this conversation, I'm trying my best to be this person, even though it's really difficult for me, is like not texting back quickly. I think it's something that I'm like trying to, I guess, like undo from the millennial or even Hollywood like work minds, like even to what I just said, is that like it's really difficult for me to like not respond back immediately, which like now, not that it comes off as desperate, but like it has a different sort of texture now, and like that is one thing. But then on the other half, it's like then I feel like I'm late and I don't like looking. So like I'm trying to make my peace with like, take your time, don't worry, you can do your emails once a week, not every day, depending on things.
Kaley, how are you? I'm curious to know how you're coping outside of the Google cauldron.
Oh,
Not to say you characterize it that way. That's my characterization.
No.
But you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, well, first I'll say, Kyle, it's so European coded of you now to be like, I'm actually going to respond to emails Tuesday afternoons, and I'll see you next Tuesday afternoon. I love that for you.
I'm trying to do it. I don't do it. I'm trying.
Yeah, so I'm doing well. I mean, I'm only like 3 weeks out, and I feel like,
okay, got it. This is brand new.
7
Basically,
years.
she's just been making me work harder now that we're fully business partners.
Okay.
I'm back in the Google cauldron. No, I'm just kidding.
I mean, Megan said like this transition is going to be good for your sympathetic nervous system, and I feel like it is. I feel less urgent. I last week like spent over an hour trying to rescue a stray cat, and I was like, this is annoying, but I would have never had time for this at YouTube. I would have been like, somebody else will deal with that.
Did you succeed?
I did not. Now I'm dang a little bite that I got from this stray cat. But yeah, wow. I'm like, I texted Megan and I'm like, this is cool that I don't have as many meetings and I can actually just live my life and still produce a lot of like, still be prolific. Like, I think what's important too about this is you're not compromising the quality of the work. And that is where, even though I would adjust my norms around communication, I don't think I wanted to or would ever want to adjust my expectations for the high quality of work that I need to receive from my teammates. And same thing with myself. I'm like, I have a lot more time, but I still want the work to be good and not sloppy and high quality and rigorously researched and all of that kind of thing.
Speaking of the work, is the idea that Cool Shiny then becomes that is the thing? Yeah.
So we have two different kind of branches. We have Cool Shiny Culture, which is our Substack. It's free. It's like a weekly-ish newsletter that we kind of write like for our friends and our family and people like Kyle that are doing interesting, fun, kind of thinking that we want to be in dialogue with. And then we have Cool Shiny Insights, and that's for brands and people with money and people that need our help decoding culture, understanding and mapping culture, and really understanding why cultural relevance is an important KPI and kind of what their position in culture should be.
Sure, Megan. What about what's happening that needs decoding right this minute?
Well, I was just going to say, when it comes to this larger conversation that we're having about Gen Z and the workplace and kind of like what that means in the emergency state of it all, I think we can kind of dissect what are the larger forces like that are at play here in this conversation. And I think one thing that I was thinking about was kind of the idea of discernment and like the idea that not every notification that comes through is like super important and needs to be addressed. And that's something that, I've been telling brands about Gen Z for 10 years. And that's something that we've always said, that they're just so adept at combing through stimuli and what's important and what's not. And so there's different like ways that they communicate that through the internet and through technology that are innate to Gen Z that aren't to everybody else. So even in this conversation around work and like what's normal, I think is us kind of coming to a new normal around how to show respect to your elders in a remote workplace. Because the idea
Right.
of like someone ignoring you if you're in the office is super rude. But the idea of me not responding to Kaley when I'm at my own house cleaning up my dog's puke, like clearly that's a different situation. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think
Right. Well, because it's much. Sorry to cut you off. It's much more. It's much more difficult to discern whether a request or an instruction or a whatever a reminiscence is actually landing with someone if you're not looking at them and being able to tell. Like exactly to your point, I could be super angry with you and you could be cleaning up dog's puke, and I could just get madder and you could just continue to be unaware. I mean,
yeah. And so I kind of see this urgency and kind of this frustration with Gen Z for not kind of absorbing this urgency as kind of a larger issue with the workforce and a refusal of them to absorb the emotional labor that exists due to remote work. And not just like the idea that we're all working from home, but like globalization of work, right? Where it's like we're all living in different times of day in different contexts. And then also the idea that the emotional labor of like being managed is, I feel like, something that's not happening anymore. Like I'm lucky I had Kaley, and then we had a really great manager, Carissa, who actually, you know, cared about us. But we also saw a lot of people who just weren't getting that same management. And then also, I think Gen Z specifically, that just doesn't exist for them. The infrastructure isn't there to give them that like socio-emotional like kind of hand-holding that they need. So I was having a lot of conversations with frustrated Gen Zs who were like had valid concerns, but then when I would explain to them where the older generation was coming from, they'd be like, oh, and like I was kind of being like, they have their reasons, they're not giving you kind of good context, but like here's this and this and here's what you need to do. And so I think this is just kind of a instance of there being a lot lost in translation as everybody's being squeezed so much because the corporate machine wants to make as much money as possible, you know? And I think some of these things fall to the wayside.
Yeah. Did you guys see the new the D's Links story from, or the newsletter from today? The headline is "The loneliness epidemic is the dating hellscape, is the job hunt humiliation ritual, is the ambient panic we just have now." And then Delia continues to say, "I think we're all worried about the same thing." And this is in the headlines. So I think you're probably right, that it's a matter of like ameliorating all of that stuff and being able to see it as sort of one polycrisis, as opposed to sort of heavily delineating between lines of responsibility or whatever, which may have been the case in the past.
Which Kaley and I keep coming to right now is like the theme of connection, and just people are just so hungry for connection and like ways to connect. And I think that as we've been so focused on the niches and all of that, we've been so focused by defining each other by difference. And so I think people are just like looking for like, where does the Venn diagram overlap now? And so as brands are going to come to this and like get back into their like, you know, brand as like community builder era, I think that there's going to be a lot of money spent on this. But if it's not done in a way that is like speaking to the very discerning public right now, it's just going to be money wasted. So we're like really trying to pick out what are those codes and cues. Why is Group 7 really popping off, and like what can be done there instead of just like replicating that like rinse and repeat, because we're seeing more brands start to chase culture, which we love, but they're doing it without the full context of understanding that's really going to make it land.
To that end, my wife and I were talking today about Halloween costumes, and I think we landed on. Well, I'm going to tell you. Spoiler alert for those out there trick or treating in Greenpoint. I think we're going to be 6'7".
No,
I just said that to Bobby today because we're going to dinner, and I was like, it's a really easy thing to do. I think we're going to do that as well.
Well, but what Megan just told me, what Megan just reminded me of, which I can get it, is that if anybody accuses me of being too unk, I can just be like, no, I'm Group 7. See, I can double mean it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we see what you're
Kaley,
doing.
why
But
did you react like that? You really hate my Halloween costume
I
idea.
just really hate 6-7. It's so annoying. Like literally sitting at restaurants, kids on the other table
Yeah.
are like 6-7, 6-7, and I don't know. I have Gen Alpha nieces and nephews, and I love them so dearly. But sometimes they just get stuck in these like vocal stems, and to me, the 6-7 thing is like so a lot of culture I think adults dismiss as nonsensical, and I push back on that a lot. Like I think it is our job to make sense of the nonsense, but this one really just does seem like a vocal stem that
It
is
really
Yeah,
is.
wait, I've
running
never heard the
through.
term vocal stem. You
Whoa, you're
please,
missing a
Yeah.
key part of discourse, Ben.
yeah, please
Wow.
explain. Please
Well, first I
explain.
have to say ballerina cappuccina.
Yeah.
Okay, okay. Is that
Yeah.
well? I mean, I know Italian brain rot, or I know them as characters, but not the idea of vocal stem is not
Well, so
that's
the
not an
vocal
unfamiliar term for
stem,
me.
like where that comes from, is like the larger conversation about everybody having autism and like the autism memes and stimming being a part of having autism. So a vocal stem has just
Ah,
become like, this is the catchphrase that I have, it's stuck in my head almost like a song. And so people will just like, this is my stem right now or whatever. And like, that's what the idea is. And like, to that point,
okay.
Kaylee, like, yes, I think Gen Alpha is now like most of their life is a sort of like a grab bag of stims. But I think that's also true of Gen Z millennials and probably a bit of Gen X too. Like that's definitely a part of everybody's culture. And the difference is, and I know that I've talked to friends about this and written about this in some ways. The difference is that like the factory of stims is so big now, and like not by design. Like it's just like that's just digital culture. And there's so much, and a lot of it is sort of like by design, trying to make sure you don't understand it. Like Cybao, it's a really good example. Like you don't know that I'm telling you to like shut up in a really rude way, so I say that and put a heart, and you don't understand it. But then on the flip side of that, you have 6-7 or even Skibbity or even like I don't even remember what it was the barbershop haircut that cost a quarter, like that acronym,
Chicken
like
stars.
those like sure like these a lot of these don't mean anything anymore, and that's also the point too. It's like I know the reference and that's enough, and eventually that reference
Yeah.
even goes away where it's just like I just say it because it feels good in my body and because it annoys you, and that's then a new meaning. So like that's I think Kaylee, to what you're getting at is like a lot of these things is part of like Gen Alpha has a bit of like trickster energy to them, like true like chaotic true chaos energy. And a part of that, I think, is like I like to push the button. If that button is by saying literal numbers, you can't come at me. Like I'm doing math. Why are you mad at me?
Yeah, agreed. I think Labubu falls into that category too.
Totally.
I maintain that Labubu would not be as popular if it wasn't as fun to say.
Agreed.
Skibbity, all of those
Yeah.
things.
And it's so interesting, right? Like we talked about this actually on the last pod relative to Halle Berry and the potential, uh, her potential inception um Aperol
Aperol
Spritz
Spritz.
as a yeah, exactly, of Aperol Spritz as a meme. In the investigation that I was doing, which was very informal and it was involving a lot of rosé during Cannes Lions a few years
As
ago, but
of course.
you know, in that investigation, one of the other things that came up, I mean, people talked about like, okay, it was this influencer moment, or it was the color, the bright orangeness is super Instagrammable or whatever. But somebody who is a long time ad titan was just like, no, it's fun to say. There's there I can't remember what the name of what the word he
Good point.
used to describe that, but it along the lines of like it's a mellifluous sort of
Yeah.
thing to say. And yeah, I think you're right about Labubu. I was in Hudson over the weekend, Hudson, New York, which is a couple hours north of New York, and stopped at a gas station, and they were selling Labubus, or at least counterfeit ones, at off the counter at the gas station in Hudson, which I found very strange.
It's the
Or are just
great
Labubus available everywhere now?
They are like it's the unfortunately the great culture equalizer. It's like that just means that like you're a part of everything. But like it. Look, I've seen it in multiple countries and multiple capitals of countries where they're there alongside like I saw this in London where it's like you have literally the royal family and then like a Labubu next to it. So it's like that sort of like tells you how it's been elevated in a way, and that it also is like it's on one hand it's like beautiful, like we have global culture, but on the other hand it's like, okay, sure, what do we do with this? Like if it was something more than I think just like a fun toy that like is already going out of style, then it would be different. If it was like not to be woo woo, but like if the Labubu was actually like be kind to each other and stop being fascist, like that would be amazing. That we're all sharing in this idea, but like instead it is a product that is going to go out of style and like litter all of the thrift stores and eventually landfills, which is why it sums up a lot of things. But anyway, it's fun to say it too.
Yeah, I think one of the things you're speaking to is something that we go back to a lot, which is the culture curve. So we talk about like things being emergent and then dominant and then moving into residual spaces. And I think, you know, Labubus or Lafufus, the faux Labubu being in a gas station, that speaks to it being like kind of in the dominant, even heading towards residual phase.
Yeah, for sure.
I thought this was really interesting in Pride Month, June of last year. I was in like a CVS or Walgreens, I can't remember which, and the Pride merch was still like extremely rainbow washed versus like the Pride merch of Target, which you know, like, I don't know, slightly more dominant stores. Everybody in the discourse was talking about the beigeification of Pride. It was like kind of interesting that like because CVS and Walgreens sit a little bit like further removed in the more residual space of culture, they avoided the beigeification of Pride this year.
So wait, you're saying that in 2024, I just want to make sure we know what last year means. In 2024, it was more beige, and this year.
No, I think it was this year. I guess just June of this year.
No, it was last year because this year Target didn't have a Pride anything. So that was last year.
Even worse.
Right. So like that's like they would have had a beige Pride if it was still woke 1.0, but woke ended. And maybe when it's woke 2.0, then we'll have a beige Pride in CVS, and who knows what's happening in Target and elsewhere.
Well, okay, so it's interesting you should say that, because when I was going to make a sort of a cheeky shout out to John Darien and the interior designer in New York and his current Target holiday collection, which has a whole bunch of like very cute, very quote unquote interior decor sort of stuff, and you know, which is the sort of thing that you would I think call there are parts of it that are gay coded. There are parts of it that are chintzy. There are parts of it that are kitsch, but as a whole, it's charming and lovely. And like we have bought some stuff and have it around the house. This blanket, which nobody can see, is right up here as an example. Like to a certain degree, does the beigeification just mean sort of integration into the wider system of design and availability, you know, as an inevitable march of this, like, trying not to distinguish the two? I'm not casting a value judgment on that. I'm just wondering if that's the inertia.
I think so. I think the beigeification of Pride was like very specific in the context of woke 2.0 and like MAGA. That was very much like Target's response, and you know, companies like Target's responses to the conservative pressure that was being put on them. I think what maybe you're referring to is like a little bit of the like more macro, like millennial gray, beige, you know, beige colors that people gravitate towards. But the beigeification of Pride, I think, was like a very specific, sort of separate context. But let's get back to
anyway. Shout out John Darien.
I want to talk more about Halloween. I threw a Halloween party this weekend.
I'm going to go on record and say that I don't understand Halloween, and it's always perplexed me.
What's not to understand?
Kaylee, okay, hold on one second, please. I'm going to explain that, Kaylee, and maybe what you want to talk about feeds into this a little bit. We were driving around upstate over the weekend and noticing how crazy the takeovers have gotten, and it seems to me, and I'm on record as not being a huge Halloween person, not being a Halloween person at all, and finding it all a little bit annoying, frankly. But it occurs to me that it is much more turbo than it has been 10 years ago, for instance. And what I was saying to Marcella, I was like, I wonder, is this a reaction to the fact that the world seems so scary and out of control that we find spaces that are scary, quote unquote, that we can control, and we assemble those as a coping mechanism? And I wonder, well, A, I wonder what anybody's thoughts are on that, and B, I wonder if that, Kaley, was part of what a vector of what you wanted to talk about.
I feel like Megan has lots of thoughts about the context of Halloween. So Megan, go for it.
No, I have no response to that.
Okay, that was really great.
That was really deep.
I'll step him in. Well, okay, I will say Megan has long said that to Gen Z, Halloween is their Christmas, and Halloween
Yeah.
is like their
Okay.
gala. So I think it's less about trying to make sense or control the scary world, although I think there are threads of that. I think it's more just like Gen Z is really into Halloween. They've always been really into Halloween, and they have made the rest of us also slightly more into Halloween. The other thing that I think is interesting, I moved last year back to the Midwest after living in LA for 7 years, and Halloween is like not that big of a thing in terms of decor in LA, but here in Chicago, it is like bursting at the seams, spiders, webs, skeletons, the gigantic, 30-foot skeleton. And I think that's also just speaks to like the weather and the feeling of fall, and the feeling like I want to mark this transition and do something fun after we're like depressed that summer has ended here in the Midwest, and probably in New York too. So yeah, I think there's some like location dependent stuff, but I do think that the overall like cultural bar on Halloween has risen considerably in the last like 5 or 6 years.
Yeah, my wife, who is English, is very, by virtue of being English, is very Christmas coded, and she was just like, no, it's because it marks the start of the transition into Christmas. And I think that might just be you, Marcella. So I'm interested to know, Kyle, how the Halloween, the Barcelona report.
Okay, well, first off, your wife is right in a lot of ways, but that's a European context.
As is often the case,
Sure.
as is generally the case.
However, like Halloween, I've been here for a little over 3 years, and like the first year I was here, there was no Halloween anything. This year, Halloween has become a big thing. It's everywhere, which is
Interesting.
really like it's a very labubification of a holiday. And like I've even had friends who are Spanish be like, "This isn't even our holiday. Why is this stuff here? Like this doesn't." They don't have the context. It doesn't make sense. They're not going to be celebrating it. So like it's just that sort of like purely cash play, and like and if it's happening in Barcelona, it is quote unquote a big city, but it's a very small city. It's a very conservative city. And so like if that's happening here, like again, like that's a really big Labubu marker if we want to use that. But it's also very different from the American iteration of it. And it never will be, well, it will never have the same sort of hallmarks of it in the States because you don't have that context. But I think to me, and again, like I've experienced part of this like coming in and out, is that like to me, to what you're talking about, Ben, and I think in ways that you're talking about too, Kaley, is that like Halloween now to me, and the reason why it's so big and why it's not the beginning of the holiday season is because it's an opportunity for you to make your own amusement park or haunted house or experience. So basically it's like the sleep no moreification of your own home. You can be that for your neighbors. You can sort of like put on your own horror movie. And it's sort of like when we don't have religion and we don't have like all these sort of things that bring us together, you have to make your house a haunted house to attract the strangers to come and take photos. And yes, that happens with the Christmas decorations as well. But like Halloween, it doesn't have the baggage unless you are very sort of like conservative Christian, where you're like, no, that's the devil. Like otherwise, like you will participate in it because it's so tied into entertainment. So like let's say, and like walk with me for a moment is like we all know, and it's a very American. This is actually that's not American. This is international because I know those people here. It's the quote unquote. Oh, I'm gonna write that screenplay. I'm gonna like make that movie. Like I studied film, but like now I work in finance. Like I'm gonna make it in Hollywood one day. Like that is now I think filled in with like I have made a haunted house. I have made this experience that you can sort of encounter, and like it can be an extension of this sort of like I'm getting that creative kick out because a lot of the creativity that I was supposed to do didn't pan out.
Wow.
That's my
Yeah, we
theory.
talk a lot about cultural moments and how cultural moments are kind of just like spotlight shown on different spaces. And I think one thing that's special about Halloween is there's just so much there, whether you love horror, whether you love cosplay, like, and every time you kind of tap into one of those cultural moments, it's like you're buying a lottery ticket to go viral. So it's like every year it's like, cool, I get to participate in the creative project that is Halloween. And I also think it being like a whole month is like also important because, you know, you see everybody else. Like, I don't know about you guys, but I'm seeing a lot of conversation over the weekend of like, wait, why was everyone doing Halloween this weekend? I thought it was next weekend. Am I behind? Like, did I miss it? And so I think there's kind of this idea of like, you just want, again, you want to be in community, you want to join, and there's a lot of different ways into this particular cultural moment.
Megan, that the idea of participation as culturally lottery ticket is, I think, really very apropos.
Yeah. And I think it's also something that you build on, right? Where it's like doing something year over year makes it more interesting every year. And so if you're like, this is my 4th year doing my haunted house, it's going to be bigger, better, more interesting. And then also that just gives you more gravitas with your narrative that you're coming out with, because it's like, you're not new to this, you're true to this. And like, even people who like every year dress up as the same costume, even if it's lame, it's like, okay, well, but you're committed to the bit. So that's cool and interesting.
Well, 6-7 is going to be awesome in Halloween 2026. I'll tell you that much right now.
The other thing I think Megan is speaking to, you know, you said there's the ways in like horror, and then there's cosplay. I think there's also just general fandom, and the kind of elements of fandom are so, you know, complementary to Halloween, of like expression, identity, community. And I think that what we see in like the top Halloween costume list really speaks to fandom. So we're seeing like tons of K-pop demon hunters, you know, Labubus, lots of Minecraft, lots of like Titans stuff. So Starwing and Robin, and just like a lot of things that are related to the fandoms that people are interested in right now.
It's also so much easier than Christmas, than any other holiday, to be a branded special in a really easy way. It's a win for Hollywood. It's a win for fashion. It's a win for like consumer products. It's a win for food. Like, it's a win for every industry to show up and like, you know, make your thing fit into it or to become a product. Like, there's no other, again, to that point of you can have your own amusement park, is like that's speaking to like anything you want in any industry will come and support it, because, well, Christmas is Christian, or like Easter, okay, that's Christian too. Valentine's Day, well, if you're single, like that gets too political. This is ironically very apolitical.
That's interesting. Halloween as the apex of postmodern capitalist expression.
100%. 100%.
Yes, but also just really fun and like an excuse to
Well, that's also,
all right, fine.
But that's why
this is where you and I differ, Kaley, but that's a whole different thing.
But no, like truly, I'm like a huge believer that partying is really important. Throwing parties is important. And yes, it is like a capitalistic endeavor. And did I spend way too much on my Halloween party? Yes, of course. But I also like got to see all my friends, and that's really fun. And I got to dress up as something that I really like, which is Parvati from The Traders, and my husband was
that's a great costume.
So yeah, it's like also like this is content that I like to watch and like I'm just into. So I don't know. I take the more optimistic side of Halloween.
Yeah, that's fair enough. All right. Well, listen, guys, we've reached the end of Hip Replacement episode number 32. Our guests have been Megan Collins and Kaley Mullin from God damn it, say it.
Cool Shiny Insights.
Cool Shiny. Jeez. Oh yeah. Sorry. My pre-dementia brain went with me there. but with Cool Shiny, which is both Substack letter, which you should subscribe to, and also paywalled trend reports and insights and stuff that people, as you said, Kaley, with money can buy. So please patronize accordingly. Any place else that the kids should look for you?
CoolShiny.com.
No. Do not come find us anywhere else.
Right. We are not trying to be disturbed right now. Please do not call my cell phone. All right. Well, it's been a pleasure to have you guys on. Thanks very much, Kaley, Megan. Kyle, great to talk to you. Glad we're going to be replicating Halloween costumes on either side of the Atlantic this week. And we will be back next Tuesday for another episode of Hip Replacement. In the meantime, have a great week, guys. Happy Halloween.
Thank you so much. Bye.